Yeah, it always starts off when we're doing those reading guides where it's like, I don't know if this is going to be as good as it was last year, or last season. And I just was kind of blown away by the books this time. So I loved Riley Sager's latest. I would love to be on a crumbling cliff in Maine right now. Yeah, all that is mine I carry with me is one of my top 3 favorite books of the year so far. There she.
Hi.
Hello.
Let me just check my. Can you hear me okay?
You sound perfect.
Okay, great. Because we're doing audio in this, but this was not working for Mike. So Mike is on the computer. All good. Hello.
Hi, look at you all dressed up. I thought you might be in your pajamas. We would
The
have been
bottom half is in PJs. We don't need to tell anyone that.
Wearing sweatpants too.
Yeah.
You got to do what you got to do to survive.
Just before we get started, I'm kind of getting like a snippet of everything on video for reel ultimately. So I'm just going to give me a little wave. There you go. Yeah. Perfect. Done.
Yes, we're just kind of people on the chat are talking about books that they are reading right now that they're loving. And one of my favorites I read this summer, Catherine, was Strange Sally Diamond. And I want to say that you were the one who told me about Liz Nugent to begin with.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Ahead of the curve, because I think like this book is, I think, getting a lot of attention in the States, whereas maybe like previous books didn't get as much.
Mm-hmm.
And like she was #1 here in Ireland for 9 weeks with that book.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's been really fun to see people getting more and more excited about it. I'm seeing more about it. And it's one of those crime plus type of books where it's about found family and people who are different than us. And
have you read any of her other books?
I read Unraveling Oliver. And what was the one? What Lies Beneath or something? It looks like she's buried in the ground.
I don't know the American covers. It might be.
There's a bad.
Is it Skin Deep?
Mother.
That's Skin Deep. Yeah.
Okay.
My favorite is actually the second one, which is called Lying in Wait.
That's what it is. That's Lying in Wait.
Oh, that was the one. Okay, I really love that one. Yeah.
It was well, yes, and I read it in one day. It was really good. Meredith and I talked about that one too on one of our events. But another one you told me about was Andrea Mara.
Yeah. And she was #1 for 4 weeks recently.
Wow. And you know what? We have a really hard time getting her here.
Well, I shouldn't be telling you this, so don't repeat it, but that situation is about to change.
Well, you need to let her publisher know how much I love Irish crime, because I will support it all the way.
Yeah, I think you'll be waiting a year or so, but yeah, like that situation is about to change, I think.
Good, because she's got one that I have. It's got one of the neatest premises I have read, but I'm like, it's hard for me to spend the time to read it right now when I can't sell it. So it's in my retirement stash. One of these days, I've got this long list of books I'm going to read when I actually am retired.
Yeah, I have this like magical future time where I take like 6 months off and I just read like 2 books a day. It's never going to happen. But I'm buying the books as if it is going to happen.
Yeah, they kind of make fun of me at the store because I have never read any of the Harry Potter books, and I'm just horrified to say it. But they came out right when I was having babies, and I just didn't work for me. So that's one of my projects when I'm on sabbatical at one point. So we've got lots of people too.
This is the dangers of like bookselling,
I know, it's my time to read is very, very valuable, and I can read some backlist, but I can only justify it if I can sell it in the store. So when I find books, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is the best book. And then I see like M.W. Craven is one who really hard to get his books here, but I think that's
he just won the Theakston Award, didn't he, at Harrogate? So Harrogate is like this big Crime Writing Festival, and I feel like there's a big award given on it, and I feel like he won it just a couple of weeks ago.
For Fearless, so, maybe, or for
whatever the latest book would have been is, yeah.
It's actually set in Texas, which is interesting. Well, it looks like it is 7:00, so we're going to get going. Okay. I will say, this is, we have something like 250 people signed up. Some people are going to watch it later.
Yeah.
This was one of the very biggest author signups. You're super popular.
Thank you so much.
Yes, well, we're very, very thrilled to have you. And this is our third time to talk. I think we're officially buds.
I feel like I can't launch a book now if I don't talk with Fabled first. And one day in person, it will happen. It will happen.
That's my big hope is I'm going to Dublin in 2 months. So we're really trying to squeeze in
we will do a French 75 at the Westbury. We will figure something out. Yeah.
We will make it work. That sounds good. Well, we're just so thrilled to have everyone here tonight, and especially on Pub Day. This is so exciting to have you here. And just a couple of things. We've got the chat going. We have Kai, who is our little Fabled. She's overseeing to make sure everything is going okay. We don't have any crazies in the chat. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A. We're hoping to get to them if we don't stop chit-chatting. And I'm just so thrilled to talk to you. I absolutely love this book, so I'm so excited. Without further ado, let me go ahead and introduce you. So Catherine Ryan Howard is an internationally best-selling crime writer from Cork, Ireland. Her 6 previous books have been award winners or shortlisted for prestigious crime awards. 56 Days, a thriller about a couple locked down together in Dublin that Catherine wrote while she was locked down in Dublin, was published in 2021, and it spent 2 weeks at #1 in the Irish bestseller charts and was named by the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Irish Times as a best thriller of 2021. We agree. Prior to writing full-time, Catherine worked as an administrator for a travel company in the Netherlands and a front desk agent at a hotel at Walt Disney World. She was once obsessed with the idea of becoming a BSL-4 virologist, and she still hopes to be a NASA astronaut when she grows up. We wish you well on your journey.
Thank you. Thank you.
She is currently based in Dublin, where she is almost certainly binge watching Netflix, drinking copious amounts of coffee, and procrastinating. So thank you
for
joining us to talk about your fantastic book, The Trap, which almost looks like the tarp. It's backwards.
It looks the right way around to me, so it's all good.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Well, and so it's the American debut, and I'm so excited because it seems like the UK and the Irish, they're lagging behind us for for once, right?
By a whole 48 hours. So over still counts. Over here, new books come out on Thursdays. And as you know, in the States, new books come out on Tuesdays. So this week, The Trap is out. It's now tomorrow for me. It's Wednesday for me now just. But it came out today in the States and on Thursday. And actually the UK hardback is following a couple of weeks later. So this book is basically going to be coming out for like just 6 weeks of my life, basically. Yeah.
That's great. Well, I know you're going to have a super exciting August. But tell us a little bit, tell the readers about the premise of The Trap.
So The Trap is primarily about Lucy, whose sister Nicki went missing about a year ago when the novel opens. And she is in a place where the torment of not knowing what has happened to her sister, the obsession with finding out has actually overtaken the grief of the loss potentially, because actually they didn't get on that well when her sister was around. And so this asks the question, like, what happens when that happens, when obsession takes you to a dangerous place? And the tagline for the UK edition is, to catch a killer, she'll become a victim. So what Lucy does is she tries to bait the man who took her sister and potentially some other missing women, because she's so desperate for answers irrationally, she is willing perhaps to pay the ultimate price. Dum, dum, dum.
Drama ensues. We have a lot to
Drama
unpack.
ensues. Yeah.
And I loved learning that there was a true crime in Ireland that was sort of the starting off point for the book. I won't say inspired, but can you tell us a little bit about that true crime in the Wicklow Mountains?
Yeah, so I'm glad you didn't use the word inspired, because inspired to me is a positive word. And I hate saying, that my crime novel, which is written primarily for entertainment, would be inspired by, a real life tragedy. But this was something that really, I think, cast like a long shadow over my generation and was very formative in my relationship with true crime in particular, and also then to a lesser extent crime fiction. So in the 90s here in Ireland, and actually about half an hour's drive from where I live now, one of the first woman disappeared. So there was 8 women over the course of 5 years who disappeared. I can't stress enough how unusual that was for Ireland. Like, there had never been anything like it before. And so the media came up with this term for it, the vanishing triangle, even though if you plotted the disappearances on a map, they did not make a triangle, but the media needed something like, snappy. And what's unbelievable, like mind-boggling, is that the first woman went missing 30 years ago last March. She was actually an American woman living in Dublin. And the last woman to disappear, she disappeared 25 years ago, a few days ago. And we still don't know what happened to the women, and no one has been charged in connection with their disappearances. Now, it's highly unlikely that they're all related. I think the authorities have an idea of what happened in some of the cases, but certainly some of them are connected. And so it's safe to say that for a time in the 90s, a serial killer was operating in this very small area, and he was never caught. And presumably at this stage has got away with it, because we've no bodies. So I think, like, for me, that was when true crime sort of, it sounds funny to me now, but like turned from something that I thought just happened in America, because that's where all the like movies I was watching and the stories I was hearing happened, and came into our real life while I was a teenager. So when I started paying attention to the news for the first time, the news was that Irish women were disappearing and they couldn't be found, and no one was being charged for doing it. So you could take one of us and get away with it. There would be no consequences. And I think for a teenage girl, like growing up with the news filled with these stories, because it was headline news for years. There was documentaries, there was reenactments, there was interviews, there was public appeals. They're still going on today. I think that definitely had an effect on me, and potentially is to do with why I write the kind of fiction that I do. That was a very long answer. I'm sorry.
No, it's very interesting. And it's so hard for us to imagine in this day and age, these mysterious disappearances when you can't catch the killer anymore.
Yeah. It's crazy. But like, of course, back then, like, no one had mobile phones, there was no CCTV, and things like that. So in many ways, and this goes back to kind of what I wrote about in The Nothing Man, that like we think these killers are in some way talented, they have, special skills, but in actuality, as the case was with Ted Bundy, they're just operating at a time when detection is not great, and we don't have the tools that we have today, and maybe mistakes were made on the official investigation and stuff. So yeah.
I love to joke with my mother, who thinks her generation was the best. I'm like, yeah, y'all were some amazing serial killers, those baby boomers. But okay, so I'm going to read a little passage that really struck me.
Okay.
And this is from Lucy's perspective. Lucy is the sister of the missing sister. Yeah. So an ex-boyfriend once told her that his favorite part of a night out was walking home, just him and his thoughts on a deserted street. He didn't need to walk to the front door with his keys squeezed between his fingers, ready to scratch or disable. He didn't need to text a thumbs up before he went to sleep so that someone at the receiving end could sleep too. that part of the night he loved. It was the part she had to survive. So I thought, oh, that was good. That's some good writing, Catherine. So I've been just sort of thinking about this, and I'm trying to find the best kind of question for this, but Lucy is putting herself in very, very dangerous positions in order to find the killer. And we find out in the book that these women who've disappeared, they weren't really paying attention. Most of them were on their cell phones. So, where's the balance between us being ever vigilant and doing everything we can to keep ourselves safe versus still we can't really do that. It's not like we have the power to do that. So it was very, very disturbing. That first chapter, y'all are going to love the first chapter, scared me to death. But I don't know. It's almost like these women were putting themselves in very dangerous positions. What do you think about that?
So I think there's absolutely no balance. If something happens to you, it is the fault of the person who did it to you. And I think that's what rape culture is. Like, people think rape culture is some weird thing where, everyone's getting raped or something like that. No, rape is a crime, the only crime where the victim is questioned. If someone breaks into your house and steals your valuables, the police don't say, well, you shouldn't have left your curtains open. Like, we know that it's illegal to break into someone's house. There's no question. But if a woman is raped or attacked and she's wearing a short skirt and she was drunk and she got separated from her friends, now the crime is not a crime anymore. It's a case of, well,
he had it coming.
He had it coming. Like, so for me, like, I know that's not realistic. Like, in the real world, we do have to be as careful as we can. And we are, as women, I think we are all making a million unconscious decisions every day to protect ourselves. But if something happens to us, it is nobody's fault but the person who committed the crime. And like, I would like to see more of that acknowledgement when things like this happen. So, for instance, there was a really tragic murder here last year, and actually the woman was murdered on a pathway that was named for one of the missing women from the 90s, unbelievably. But she was murdered in broad daylight, and it didn't last long, but for the first couple of days, people were saying, and I think like hashtagging and everything, she was just out for a jog. She was just going for a run. And that word just, like, the other side of that coin is if she was stumbling around drunk at night, she would have deserved what she got. Like, we shouldn't ever say she was just walking home. She was just doing this. Anything that happens to a woman at the hands of a violent man is only the violent man's fault. And I think, we can't live our lives that way, because it would be silly to throw all caution to the wind, but we are ultimately not responsible if someone does something bad to us. Like, it's their fault.
I know. Amen. And I was really thinking about the rape culture part of that when I was thinking about this, because I was so mad at Lucy for putting herself in that position. But ultimately, she's not the one who is committing the crime. Yeah.
Yeah. And as well, like, I think this book is, like all my books, basically impossible to talk about without spoiling in some way. But I would say, like, I'm sure there'll be decisions that Lucy makes that readers are like screaming at her going, what the hell are you doing? But this isn't a book about a rational person. This is a book about someone driven, quite literally mad, by the torment of not knowing what happened to her sister. So I would just bear that in mind. Poor Lucy.
Poor Lucy, yeah. Well, the book is told from several perspectives, one of them being the serial killer. And, what I was thinking was, wow, good things really happen when you breathe life into a serial killer in first person. Very, very good. So
what a quote.
So what is this sort of reminiscent of The Nothing Man? What is that like to put Catherine in the mind of a serial killer?
I mean, I think this is really funny because like I was doing another podcast thing of, well, this isn't a podcast, but another recording, sitting at my desk, half in my PJs. Like PJs from the waist down, everybody, sorry. But basically we were talking about this and they were like, you know, he was so creepy and he terrified me. And I was like, that's funny because like I kind of enjoyed writing those parts. Like for me, he's kind of good company. Like, even though he does these horrific things, like he's quite funny. I think he has a sort of black humor. Like he's, you know, I don't know what this says about me, but I really enjoyed writing his pieces. And I think that, you know, that's something I learned very early on when I was writing thrillers. Like when I started writing thrillers, I thought the scariest killer is one that has no motivation but just a compulsion and is just randomly going around killing people. And my editor told me, you know, everyone is the hero of their own life and everyone feels totally right and justified in what they're doing. And so for me, the challenge is, how do I get him to a place where you understand why he's doing what he's doing? You understand what he's telling himself about what he's doing. And that's just like a really interesting challenge for me. And I'm always, as I think if readers have read other books of mine, they'll know that I'm interested in ordinary monsters. I'm interested in, you know, not Hannibal Lecter, but like the man who sleeps beside your best friend, you know, like the ordinary man who has no identifying outward characteristics, that he is hiding this other life, because that's what reality is. That's what these men are like. And so for me, the challenge is taking the ordinariness and making that what's chilling and frightening and depressing, someone said yesterday. Depressing and terrifying.
When I turned the page and I saw that, I thought, oh yes, girl, here we go. Bring it. Well, yeah, and that just the Long Island serial killer was just found Long Island, and it was the same. Yeah. He was just an ordinary guy. So
yeah, and also weirdly, like in the trap, like, because I was thinking like, how would he be getting away with this? And I was thinking the best thing to do would be to do it in a house, like, so to have a place where, you know, if it's ever found, you're done for, but until it is, you can use it. And actually, I think they believe that he was taking them to his own property in the area. So like, what I find funny about this is like, often people will, I don't want to use the word accuse, but like sometimes they do accuse me of and other crime writers of like referring to real cases all the time and sort of using real cases, which I always find like really offensive, because what they're basically saying is we have no imagination, that we have to like rely on facts all the time. But the truth of the matter is, like, these offenders and murder in general is not that imaginative, and it only happens a certain number of ways. And you know, there's only certain types of offenders and they all behave the same way. So, you know, if you're talking about someone who started off as a peeping Tom and went to, you know, stealing underwear and then went to home invasion, you are not necessarily talking about the Golden State Killer or the Night Stalker. You're talking about that kind of offender, because they all follow the same pattern, as we've just seen, if this man turns out to be the Long Island serial killer.
All right. So speaking of ordinary people, Angela is probably my favorite character in the book, other than the serial killer. She is an aspiring police officer, and is it Gardaí?
Just think of two E's. Yeah.
Okay. And she wants to be a Gardaí. A Gardaí person, or just a Gardaí?
A guard. We say so. Guard singular, Gardaí plural. Yeah.
Okay. And I love how you make characters so ordinary. So we have maybe a below average serial killer. Cops don't knock it out of the park.
He would be furious if you could be
taking back the power. And victims who might be jerks. You know, I mean, that's kind of something we don't explore. We typically put victims of crimes on this pedestal, and you refuse to do that. So why is that important to you? And what makes your book so special?
Well, I mean, like, what is fiction for? I think fiction is for like figuring out, it's for entertainment, but it's also for figuring out like the parts of the world that we don't really understand. And I think like one of the things I don't understand is when, I've seen here with maybe it's a woman who's gone missing or it's a murder case, and the victim is like spoken about in such glowing terms. I know we don't speak ill of the dead, but like they can't all be that. Like one of the phrases that's often used is, she lit up every room she walked into. And like,
who does
how
that?
many people do you know who actually do that? But the other side, it's always the other side of it that I'm interested in. So if you are doing that, and then there's someone who's not conventionally attractive, maybe is in minority and has a name that's difficult to pronounce, was estranged from their family, did bad things, like how do we treat them? Why is their murder or disappearance less, worthy or whatever the word is? Like, to me, it's always about, if you're doing this, what is that saying about the people who are not like this? Going back to the use of the word just again, like if she was just doing this, what was that other woman doing that you're not saying that about? So I just wanted to explore things that I don't think we have space to talk about in real life, because I think it's too difficult. You don't want to say, I think you're giving that dead girl too much attention. Like no one wants to do that. No one wants to say, stop talking about, talk less about that missing woman that you're trying to find. So because we don't have the space for it in real life, we have a safe place in fiction to kind of think about it and ask those questions without hurting anyone in the process.
Yeah, one of the things that I really found fascinating with this book, and again, I'm working around spoilers, is that there are many missing women in the story.
Mm-hmm.
And there is one of the missing girls who's just a little more precious, a little more cute, a little younger.
Media friendly.
And they pretty much have the family in the palm of their hands, versus some of the other people who are missing. So why is that so important to you, to kind of shine a light on something that, I mean, it's been in the media a lot in America recently, there's just a certain type of missing girl that's more interesting, clickbait, I guess.
Yeah, like, I mean, I want to be clear that I'm never sort of preaching, like I'm never sort of shoehorning things into my novels because I'm trying to like get people to think about them. Like, this is just stuff I'm thinking about that I find interesting to explore. And, one of my favorite scenes in the book is when the families meet. So the families of the missing women have to come together to decide something that will affect them all, to do with the media. And I loved writing that scene because, one of the things I learned during the pandemic is that the worst thing that can happen is not, a global virus. It's other people. It's having to deal with other people in traumatic situations. I was just talking about this the other day about the Stephen King movie, The Mist, which is about basically aliens come to Earth, but still everyone's biggest problem is their neighbors, because people are the absolute worst. And so I was thinking, even when you're all facing this incredible trauma, this like unimaginable horror of having daughters and sisters and partners missing, you still have to deal with people who are going to behave as per their personalities. And not everyone is, the nicest person. So not everyone lights up a room when they walk into it. So like, for me, I thought that was interesting that, in the reality of the situation is that I think that's what you would face, because people don't shed who they are in the face of trauma. I think actually a lot of the time trauma maybe brings out more of who they really are. So I just thought that was interesting. Anything I'm putting in my work is because I'm like, I think that'll be interesting. And I think I'll enjoy exploring it. And also because I'm always trying to be realistic. And so this is like my idea of what I feel would really happen in this situation. Like one of the things I think she talks about in the book is like, you still have to get groceries. I actually had a much longer piece about having to get groceries, and my editor was like, you don't need a full page about having to get groceries. But this is something I think about. Like if you had something like this happen, you can't starve. You still have to go to the store and get like milk and whatever else. You have to get toilet paper, you know, like, and at what point do you do that? So for me, I'm always like trying to keep like 2 feet in the everyday, coupled with whatever craziness is going on around them, if that makes sense.
Yes.
It's very late here for me, so I might be rambling. Please tell me if I am.
You're doing great. Well, you do a great job of showing and not telling. I think for a lot of us, especially oldest sisters, you're not the boss of me. I don't want no preaching, in books. So, and you do such a great job of that. And all these things are just kind of, they really made me think. When I was reading it, I was writing down all these things I couldn't wait to talk to you about. So, all right, we're going to take a little break from talking about the trap to just overall your canon of work. So many of us here tonight are fans of Currently Reading podcasts, mostly because our friend Meredith Monday Schwartz introduced us to the beauty of Catherine Ryan Howard crime novels. And so thank you, Meredith. I know she's in the chat tonight.
She better be.
There she is. Hello, darling.
Hi, Meredith.
So we will be ever thankful for that.
But I will be.
Yes. And there are some people in the chat who maybe are just Fabled book clubbers who aren't as familiar with your work. So can you kind of explain your canon of work in that we talk about this city of yours. So I want to call it like Howard Valley or Howard Heights or something where everyone lives in this little realm.
One of my friends said the CRH cinematic universe, which I think is, yeah.
So you don't have to read them in order, and they are all, everything wraps up, and like you say, because that way you can murder as many people as you want.
Yeah. Yeah. No one has to survive if you write standalones. So
but each book has Easter eggs. So I feel like you really are delighting Catherine Ryan Howard completists who have read them all. So can you talk a little bit about how all that works, and also why Jurassic Park seems to pop up in your books?
Yeah, I'm going to have to tone down the Jurassic Park in the next one, because I really I think I've half a page in this one, and someone's just going to wear a t-shirt or something in the next one to make up for it. But the Jurassic Park thing is that it's my favorite novel. I think I read it when I was quite young, and it just had this big effect on me, and I think made me want to write novels for a living. So I kind of mentioned it in the first book, and then I thought, well, that's fun. I'll mention it in the second book, and then before you know it, people are waiting for you to mention it, so you have to shoehorn it into every single book. But in terms of the Easter eggs, I just love sticking them in. I don't plan it. It's just if an opportunity arises and I think, oh, I can put something in. But what I love is that it's real. So my favorite Easter egg is in Runtime, where someone is talking about having got a job as an actor on the TV adaptation of The Liar's Girl. But in that world, The Liar's Girl was true crime. It was a true crime drama because those things really happened. So for me, everything is happening in the same. There's a version of the world where all this is happening, and the characters in one book might be aware of characters in the other. There isn't really any crossover with the only actual crossover, as far as I know, is the article at the end of Runtime was written by the journalist in Rewind to connect my two craziest books. But otherwise, there's no crossover with characters. Even though there's some detectives that people would like to see again and stuff. Yeah. So yeah, that's how it all works. But I think, for me, my first two thrillers, Distress Signals and The Liar's Girl, are probably the most normal ones. So they're very straightforward. They're not trying anything weird or experimental. Then I went completely off the rails with Rewind. The Nothing Man is my personal favorite, even though The Trap is kind of up there with it now, because when you're writing a book, you have this like idea in your head of what it's going to be like. And it never is that. There's always a distance. But The Nothing Man was as close as I got to what that book was in my head when I first thought of it. And I just feel like I'll never have an idea like The Nothing Man again. Like it was kind of a once in a career. Although I did say that about something else and then I had another idea. So, but then what came after? Oh yeah, 56 days. 56 days, which changed everything. That was a very accidental book. Wasn't planning to write about a global pandemic because didn't know there was one coming. And that kind of changed things for me. And then Runtime, I have a pattern where like every 3 books I go a bit crazy. So like Rewind and Runtime. And someone else said to me yesterday that they think I do a crazy book and then a very dark book and then a sort of lighter mystery and then repeat. So maybe that's what's happening.
A lot of love here for Rewind.
Oh, that's nice.
Yes, well, and Meredith also mentioned your books are now being redone, so they all sort of have this look.
Yeah.
This one doesn't look quite as Dirty Dancing as 56.
The Dirty Dancing one. Yeah.
But what do you think?
Yeah.
What is it like? How does that feel to know that they're sort of getting a new life?
Well, the first 4 were never released in what you call trade paperback. So there was a hardback, which no one read because no one was reading me back then. And the little like premium paperback, which is very tall and narrow. And that's not really widely, I don't think, popular in the States. So
we keep both of each one at
Fabled.
Oh,
do you? Okay. Well, Fabled is,
we're
different.
They're
They're offering a way better service than everyone else. But I think the feeling was if we brought the first 4 out in this like trade paperback with matching covers or coordinating covers, it would be an opportunity because a lot of readers only discovered me I think on 56 days. 56 days was a monthly pick in Barnes and Noble, which really kind of changed everything when it came to the paperback. So that was the idea. And for me, I love matching things. So to see all the matchy covers makes me happy.
I always try when I'm talking to authors to match the book so that the what I'm wearing is a little bit like the color of the trap. So yeah. I do it on purpose. So I feel you.
And I try to match my decor, if you notice.
It all just looks so beautiful. I noticed.
It came with the place. So
okay, so last week I got to talk with Catherine Center, who is a very beloved romance author here in the States. And I asked her about some romance tropes and if there are romance tropes that she enjoys reading and maybe even writing. So I want to ask you the same thing. In the mystery genre, there are many tropes. We see one here, the missing sister trope. That seems to be one that people are enjoying. So are there tropes that you enjoy reading or writing or both? Are they easier to read or write or to write?
I'm honestly, I try not to think in tropes. And, one thing I'm noticing lately, and I think TikTok is to blame, is this categorizing of novels, particularly romance novels, in very sort of black and white, like, what is it, like friends to lovers or enemies to lovers and this kind of thing. And I am terrified by that because I think it shuts down the paths to discovery. So like I will frequently see readers online and stuff saying things like, I don't want to read anything about, let's say, missing sisters, or I don't want to read anything with the killer's point of view, or I hate dual timelines, or all this kind of like arbitrary stuff. And like that's what tropes are. They're kind of, I don't know how to describe it at this time in the morning, but like sort of, they're just putting books into categories before you've even opened the book. And I think we do enough of that with genre. So, mystery and thriller and those kind of things. So like, to me, I just ignore that completely. Like, I also think here tropes are not as widely discussed by readers as they are in the States. I think that's a difference as well between the countries or the territories. So I honestly, I couldn't name 5 tropes, to be honest with you, because I just don't think that way. Like, I didn't really think missing sister was a trope. So there you go. I learned one.
Yeah, yes. Well, that's so interesting to think about that being more of a States type of thing. And you're right. I do think there's so much book content in the social media. I guess this is the new thing to add one.
And I suppose we have to remember, and I have to remind myself of it quite frequently, like, the internet isn't real life. And there are so many millions of people out there buying multiple books every week who never go near Twitter or TikTok or Instagram or anything like that to talk about them. And I think it's important, like, not to lose sight of that, particularly as an author as well, because, if you're reading people saying, I hate this, or I don't want to read that. Like, for instance, when I was writing 56 Days and I hadn't told anyone yet, including my publisher, I was on Twitter and every writer I had ever met in my life was saying, I'm never going to write about this. And every reader was, I'm never going to read this. I don't want it. But people don't know what they want. Like Steve Jobs said, people don't know what they want until you give it to them. And so this kind of like closing down of, I'm not going to read this, I'm not going to read that. Trigger warnings is another thing that I think has gone absolutely off the rails. I think trigger warning has lost all meaning. Like, what happens with crime is when people list trigger warnings primarily, like, or presumably out of good intentions, they're actually spoiling what happens in the book in their review. And like, what a trigger warning is, like, originally is to prevent someone who has experienced trauma from reliving it by accidentally encountering something. And I don't think people who experienced the kind of trauma that's visited in crime novels would then be reading crime novels, because they would know what they're going to get. So, like, I would like to see that end as well. I just think this sort of slotting books into these increasingly narrow categories is preventing people from finding books that they might love.
I 100% agree. I think that was great. And we struggle with the trigger warning thing too. I want to say, with a mystery or thriller, a trigger warning for violence, I mean, it's going to happen. Yeah. But it is hard, even as a bookseller, to feel like you're reading a book and having to remember anything that possibly could bother people. It puts a lot of pressure on us as well.
But like, to me, that is just insanity. It's not common sense. Like, I get emails from people who are upset that my serial killer who rapes and murders people takes the Lord's name in vain. Now, if that's what's upsetting you on that, like, that's not my problem. That's yours. So I just think, like, we need to have some common sense in this situation as well. But I understand the need for actual trigger warnings, but I feel like they're just being thrown around so much now. And I have often seen, like, if you take a book like 56 Days, where they list, like, very specifically all the bad things that happen in the book, which basically gives the entire ending away.
We need to give people enough credit to know we're all big girls and big boys. We can handle this.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. I loved it. Taking us to church, Catherine. Okay. One of my favorite things in a book is the author's note, and yours is cracker. I'm a dairy girl, so I'm trying to. So first of all, I felt like I could have written the first part of it myself. You talk about when your family got a VCR. I remember 40 years ago when we got our first VCR, we got all of our kitchen chairs in front of the television, popped, popcorn on the stove, and watched Amadeus. And it was just big time.
Okay.
So you talk about these, as children, we watched crime stories. We read true crime. I just handled all that. And what I find, and your reference to V, I remember when that came on television, that was some scary stuff.
Yeah, Ireland probably got it like 5 years later, because back then, like, everything was on a major delay. But yeah, I remember being on TV here and people being like genuinely afraid. Like, when you think of it now, it's crazy, but yeah.
But you talk about what I find interesting, thinking about how parents are so hyper careful now with things that their children are watching. I mean, even Laura Tremaine talks about reading Stephen King novels as a child. We just did that sort of thing. And we all turned out, reasonably okay, maybe.
Yeah.
But it seems like the children now who are so protected from this are the ones who need the trigger warnings and who are really experiencing a high level of anxiety. So I thought it almost seems like, what's worse, serial killers or social media. So can you talk a little bit about your author's note and how you kind of go into your love of this genre?
Yeah. So like when I don't have children, so it's kind of easy for me to talk about, what should and what shouldn't happen. It's a different world now to the one I grew up in, but basically I'm the eldest in my family, and I was quite a little bossy, precocious little whatever. And so I just did whatever I wanted, and I kind of got away with it as long as I was quiet and I babysat when I was asked to, and so on and so forth. So we got this VCR, which honestly must have weighed like 15 pounds at least. And it had these big, like, silver piano key buttons or levers. And there was a video rental shop called Hollywood Video. It was nowhere near as glamorous as it sounds. About 5 minutes walk.
Hollywood Video.
Yeah. Everyone was Hollywood Video.
Yeah.
So it was about 5 minutes walk from our home. And I was like, I watched a lot of TV and movies when I was younger. And that's what I was doing if I wasn't reading books, basically. And I somehow wrangled like absolute carte blanche in this video shop. So I could rent anything. Now, maybe I couldn't rent 18s, I never tried, but I moved from the children's section quite quickly into something that was called True Life. And what True Life, very weirdly, for like Cork City, early 90s, it was all like made for American TV movies. So, like the Betty Broderick story, like the Diane Downs story, the Siege at Waco was one of the ones I remember watching very early on. Victim of Beauty, which I think was called Nightmare in Columbia County in the States, like the Amy Fisher story, like Menendez brothers, all this when I'm like 11 at the most. And it's crazy to me now. Like, if I had a friend, like my first niece or nephew will be here in a couple of weeks, and hopefully, and if I thought like they were watching that stuff when they were 11, like I would freak out. But it didn't really connect with me. Like, I don't think I really understood what I was watching. Like, for the longest time, I thought Dirty Dancing was about food poisoning. And you know what? If you watch it back, it tracks. Trust me. The first time you see her upset, she's in the kitchen, she's got stomach pains, etc. I think it totally works. But I don't think I really understood what I was watching, and I don't think it was real to me. So, like we mentioned, V, like a serial killer had about as much distance, was about as close to my life as aliens. Like, it just wasn't real. And that's what changed then. When in the 90s, when the women started to go missing, which was like maybe a year after I had developed this true crime obsession, because Ireland was a place where that just didn't happen. Like, we had terrorism, we had abuse, we had other things going on, but we didn't have this kind of random homicide or abduction or anything like that. So it's weird. Like, I remember going into 6th class, which is what we do when we're 12. And it was September, and the teacher was like, "What did you read over the summer?" And I said, "Flowers in the Attic." And I will never forget the look on her face. She was like, "I need to call your mother." I used to have books like confiscated. I remember reading, do you know now, like a Sweet Valley High or something, and it was called like First Kiss. and I was in 4th class, which means I was 10, and the teacher took it off me. But like, here we all are, and we're fine, you know? So I think it's almost like, you know, the way children and people in general have a lot more allergies these days, because, you know, we used to be out like eating mud and stuff. Yeah. They don't get to do that now. So yeah. So it's kind of like an exposure thing. I mean, yeah, and you know, now we're in a situation where we have protesters in libraries because, you know, books they feel are shelved in the children's section that are, you know, I mean, I won't even get into it because it drives me so mad, but I don't know. It's easy for me to say, oh, you should be allowed read whatever, or you shouldn't be, you know, because I'm never going to have to make that decision. But I would say I turned out fine. However, it was a different world. And I suppose like when that movie was over, you popped out the cassette and you brought it back. You didn't go online and find out loads more similar stories and be shown more similar things, you know, so like different world, but yeah, did me no harm in the long run, I would say.
Yeah, we're just delightful people who grew up with true crime.
And we don't murder people or anything, so
that you know of. Maybe another book. But I grew up, my YA was Danielle Steele. I'm like, I loved.
Yeah, I once faked being sick when I was in primary school, which is up until 12, so I could finish a Danielle Steele novel. Because it was so good. It was about I don't know what it was called, but it was the Japanese internment camps in the States. Maybe it was called like Swan or something like that. But it was so good. I just didn't want to go to school. I wanted to stay home and finish my book.
Well, I got Kristen Hanna's new book, which is all about nurses in Vietnam. And all I can think of is Message from Nam, which was, in my opinion, Danielle Steele's best book. I was a little bit of an expert in high school. So you know, go back and read Message from Nam.
I will do. I will add it to the list. Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to, I know it's probably nearly 2:00 in the morning.
Listen, I'm awake now, so there's no rush. It's all fine.
Okay. I do want to just really quickly circle back to the book. And I no spoilers, but you're going to expect a Catherine Ryan Howard twist in the book.
Okay.
That's all I'm going to say. But it is so good. And I want to know do you think of it before you start the book? And I also wanted to let you know that I thought the ending was perfection. And there are conversations about the ending because there is conversation fodder. So
I have already thought about how to talk about the ending without talking about the ending. So I think I can kind of do it. But to answer your first question, I absolutely knew the twist. So that was the first thing I had, you know, related to the chapter at the beginning. That was the thing I absolutely knew was going to happen. And there's also a big decision about a main character towards the end. And I knew that as well. So everything else then in between those 2 points kind of fell into place, but I absolutely knew that. And I don't think I could have written it without knowing that. Like, I think that was the kind of twist where you needed the knowledge going in and then the confidence to kind of move towards that point then. As for the ending, I know I've already seen some stuff. I know it's going to be, I don't want to say controversial, but like people are certainly
conversation fodder.
Okay, that's friendlier. Yeah, conversation fodder. And what I'm going to say are two things. First of all, I write the book that I want to read. And this is the kind of book that I want to read. And the only thing you can discussable, I just in the chat, great word. The thing I want to read is not the standard crime or thriller or mystery novel where there's like a Sherlock Holmes summing up at the end. The books I want to read ask me to meet them on the page. They ask me to participate in the storytelling. So not everything is spelled out. And the only thing, like there's been many, many times when I've asked myself, is it worth this. Like, wouldn't life be easier if you just wrote, I could name a mega selling novel, but I won't, something more standard. And then I always say no, because the only thing I can be led by is writing the book that I want to read, because if I want to read it, I have to trust that there are people out there who also want to read it. And I would also say it is not, as far as I'm concerned, ambiguous. The answers are on the page, absolutely on the page. And there is one thing I think people will feel, I don't want to say shortchanged, but they'll be like, I could have done with finding out more about that thing. But I would just say, this is a novel about a woman who is looking for her sister, trying to find out what happened to her sister, and potentially other missing women. And you have all those answers at the end. So just
if you
don't complain to me.
If you trust my reading taste, dear viewers, know that I loved it. And I love endings, even like All That Is Mine I Carry With Me by William Landay, where you have room to make your own choice, your own conclusions.
This is exactly it. Like, room is the word. I want two people to be able to read this book and get together and say, what do you think happened there? And for them both to be right, because the novel isn't mine anymore. It's yours. You can decide what happened. I feel like all the clues are there, but and I did an interview yesterday with Abby Endler, who's Crime by the Book on Instagram, and we were talking about the ending, and she said, what I loved is that I was thinking about it for so long afterwards, and I didn't realize it until she said it, but that's exactly what I want. I don't want the novel to end in such a neat, complete way that you say, well, that's that novel read, and you close it and you don't think about it again. Like, the fact that the novel was alive in her thoughts after she had stopped reading, like, there's no better compliment. And to her, these were people whose threads like continued on after the last page. And like, if that's not what we're aiming for, I don't know why I'm in this business, So no complaints about the ending, okay?
Well, yes, Abby and I had chips and margaritas together last year. She's now a Texan. So
of course, yes. Yeah. If I came to Texas, I could meet you both. Like, this is the whole, well, we're going to see each other in Dublin, hopefully, but yeah.
Yes. And then we can discuss the ending of the book.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have mentioned in the past, we're wrapping up here, that some books you write for yourself and some books that you write for others. For instance, Runtime was more a book for you. What are you working on next? Can you tell us a little?
To clarify there, I would say that, like, I'm always writing the book I want to read, but sometimes I burrow very deep into that, and I don't care if people are going to like it or not. Runtime is definitely one of those. But what I'm working on now, I can't say too much about, but I will say it's my first book not to be set in Ireland. So it's actually going to be set in Florida.
Oh, wow.
But it still involves Irish people. They just happen to be in Florida.
Well, there is certainly a lot of fodder.
Not Disney World before everyone starts. Yeah.
There is more to Florida than for sure.
Is, yes. Yeah.
Well, wait. And just again, thank you for creating this wonderful world for us that we get to enjoy once a year. And
we so much.
We hope that we just wish you the very best of luck this entire month as you're rolling out these parties all month long.
There's just one party.
Let's see. I just want to see if there's okay, Meredith had a question and then we will wrap up. I
did say to Meredith earlier, I better see you in the Q&A. So she's here. Just doing what
we want as many Catherine Ryan Howard books as we can get. How is it feeling to write a book a year? Does it ever panic you that you won't be able to come up with something fresh in that time? How do you do it?
I am in a constant state of panic, I would say, because it's not like I have loads of ideas in the bag. Like, I just have the idea I'm working on now. And actually this year, I really, just because of the way my deals are working, I really tried to go straight in to the next book rather than messing around for 6 months, which is what I normally do. And I really felt the kind of like, you know, this is more of a struggle to get into this than normal, because I certainly need that like percolation time. So at the moment, I just have the idea I'm working on now, and I'm sort of scouting around for something new. But like, it's mind-boggling to me that we are sitting here talking about my 7th novel, because famously, after I wrote Distress Signals, I said to my first agent, I'm never going to have another idea as good as that. And I would say that's one of my lesser good ideas. So less impressive ideas. So you just have to trust that like it will come. You have done it like 7 times now, 8, you know, considering the one I'm working on. And I do think when I get to book 10, I may take a holiday, but you know, up until then, I want to keep going on the book a year. I don't know like what I would do. Like, I have a friend who, for publishing reasons, had to take a year where she didn't have a book out, having had a book out a year, you know, for several years previously. And like, it was no fun. It was no fun because she was doing all the hard work of being a writer, but she wasn't getting to do the fun stuff, you know, because there was no book coming out. And this is like my reward for sitting here hours on end throughout the year, usually during very hot weather, because I always time it wrong. And so I like having a book out every year. Yeah. And you know, as long as it can continue, I will do it. I will do it. Yeah.
Okay. Last question. So, and someone had just mentioned this, but the last time we talked, or maybe it was 2 years ago when we talked, we just asked you for some good recommendations for Irish crime novels. And it does seem like not just the crime genre, but Ireland is really having a moment, and maybe it always has. We're just paying more attention to it. I think about Claire Foster, who is fantastic.
I think there's 4 Irish authors on the Booker shortlist today. Yeah.
The Louise Kennedy, Trespasses, she's got a new one coming out. My friend Sarah from Sarah's Bookshelves loved The Rachel Incident. That was another good.
I have that right. She's from Cork as well, actually, Caroline. So I have that on my shelf, saving it for the magical day when I have loads of time to read with no pressure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Meredith, we talked about Liz earlier, how much we love Strange Sally Diamond. So do you have any others that you'd like to put into either our ears to listen? A lot of books we can get audibly, cannot get in person, but what are some that give us some good ideas?
Okay, I think I've basically like told you about everyone. So there was a gang of us went to Harrogate a couple of weekends ago, and like I'm just thinking of who was in the picture, and I've basically introduced you to like all
not
of them.
Not everyone here has heard all of them. So
okay, well, if like Liz Nugent, Andrea Mara, Andrea Carter, Jane Casey, I would absolutely like highly recommend them. Jane has a series. I don't know how readily available it is in the States.
They're available.
But are they? Okay. So Maeve and Josh, they are the Ross and Rachel of crime fiction. They are she's just brilliant. And like, she knows what she's driving us crazy. Like, but you know, like it's brilliant. And they're so good, and her books are so dark. And when you meet Jane, she is just like the nicest person ever. And actually her standalone, The Killing Kind, is going to be on Paramount Plus in September. So that would be a good book of hers to start with, because I presume that will be more widely available. And that's a standalone, not related to Josh and Maeve, or Maeve and Josh, because Maeve is the main character. I would also recommend a true crime book that came out here by Mark O'Connell called A Thread of Violence, which is about a very famous case that inspired, this is like 6 Degrees of Separation.
We have it Fabled. We have it
at Fabled. So good. It is so good. It's about the Malcolm MacArthur case, which was the inspiration for John Banville's The Book of Evidence, which is Liz Nugent's favorite book. See how I can connect it all together? And it's stunning. And, you know, there was something in there about true crime and about victims, and how Mark O'Connell didn't want to write too much about the victims in a book about the murderer, because he felt that that was doing another violence to them, which really struck me, because you would, you know,
think the other
conventional thinking, is that we foreground the victims, but he was saying, no, I don't want to connect them to this man of violence and what he did. So A Thread of Violence by Mark O'Connell, I would highly, highly recommend.
The one that we have a hard time getting Andrea Carter here. That's one that of all the ones you've spoken about. So
I will say, so she has a series set in a show, which is in Donegal, but she is actually working on a standalone, and I think maybe the standalone might be I'm always just trying to think of like the way publishing works. I know it's easier to get a standalone than it is to get a series. So, you know, and there's a few writers like on the horizon. I think we'll have some really exciting books to talk about next year and things like that. But you'll never run out. You will just never run out of Irish crime fiction if that's what you're into. And if you haven't read all of Tana French's novels, what have you been doing? Because you need to start with them.
Well, this has just been as lovely as I was expecting it to be. We love talking to you, Catherine. I know a lot of people were so excited.
Don't tell anyone else, but it's always my favorite event. Don't tell anyone else.
Thankful.
If anyone asks me, I'll deny it, but it's my favorite event.
Yep. We'll keep the secret. And if you'll just hang on one second, we want to
no problem.
What is this month? August. So in September, our book club is going to be Shark Heart, a love story. Have you heard of this book, Catherine?
No, but what a title. What a title.
Okay, listen to this premise. It's about a husband and wife. They just get married, they're in love, and the man unfortunately starts turning into a great white shark, which sounds like the complete opposite of a book I would ever want to read. However, it's fabulous. It's beautiful. And it's one of the weirdest books I've read, and I absolutely loved it. And we are going to talk to Emily on September the 12th. So the books come out on Tuesday. It is our pioneer pick for our subscription box. I know it was a book of the month club pick, so just keep that in mind. But this is going to be a really interesting conversation. So that is Shark Heart, and sign up. There's a sign up in comments. But that's about it. So thank you, Catherine. Again, we are cheering for you hard here in hot Central Texas. Wishing you luck, and hopefully I'll get to see you in a couple of weeks.
Hopefully, and we'll have to put pictures online to prove we had French 75s in the Westbury a la 56 days, and they're on me.
It's happening. All right.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, and have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.